Hello, this is Bob Cooke here. I'm speaking on behalf of the YouTube channel TA Therapy, and this is a presentation on the 5 different schools of transactional analysis psychotherapy from 1961 to 2012. So let's look at the first school that was created by, in fact, of course, Eric Berne, and that school was called the Classical School, sometimes known as the Bernian School of TA psychotherapy, founded by Eric Berne in 1961. And this school really emphasized the strengthening of the adult ego state. So people working from a TA approach under this school would really be interested in helping the client strengthening their adult ego state. So they will be able to identify problems in terms of which ego states the contamination is in, whether parent ego state, adult ego state, or child ego state. And it wouldn't be working particularly with the child ego state or the parent ego state, but more an understanding and awareness of where the issues originated from, and helping the client strengthen up their here and now functioning, in other words, their adult ego state capacity to be able to deal with the problems from whichever part of the ego states they arose from. So this is strengthening the adult ego state. People around Eric Berne at this time was Frank Ernst, who was very famous for the OK Corral, Cartman, famous for game theory, and Steiner, who wrote the famous book Script People Live in 1974. So this approach was probably, or could be seen as almost early CBT work, a large focus on cognitive behavioral techniques, strengthening the adult, as I said, and very much in this vogue. Okay, later on we have the next school which we'll look at, which is the redecision school of psychotherapy. Founders were Bob and Mary Goulding, early transactional analysts, who brought Gestalt methods into TA. Their whole thinking was very much around not so much strengthening the adult ego state, but working with the child ego state. They said that early decisions were made in the child ego state, and that the therapist needed to help the client be aware of those early decisions so they can make new decisions from their child, with the help of the adult, of course, part of themselves. And it's from that approach mainly that the redecision school is known, that new redecisions needed to be made in the child ego state, not the adult, not the parent, maybe anchored, of course, in the here and now adult ego state, but the work needed to be in the child ego state, where the child part of the person, of course, made those original decisions. Okay, and as I said at the bottom, they very much brought a lot of Gestalt methodology into transactional analysis. So we've got the classical school, which is concentrating on reinforcing the adult and strengthening the adult. And now we have the redecision school, 1970, founders Bob and Mary Goulding, who concentrated their work on, of course, the child ego state. Also in that time, the next school which arose was the cathexis school, founder Jackie Schiff and Mo Schiff. And their concentration was not so much on the therapist working with strengthening the adult ego state, or in fact working with the child ego state, but very much with the parent ego state. They believed in the concepts of reparenting, the therapist looking for the deficits of the actual client in their history, and working on a reparenting process, or indeed a complete replacement of the parent ego state with the new parental interject of the therapist. Quite a radical process, and of course it had its own challenges, but it became a way of working, a school, if you like, within TA, which was quite popular in the early 70s. Isn't so popular now. In fact, not many TA therapists really work from purely a cathexis point of view. Influences on transactional analysis, very, very strong. Ken Meller wrote a lot about this type of therapy. A lot of the discounting material in transactional analysis came from this era. So it was a popular school in the 70s, though not so much now at all, really. Okay, that's that school in the 1970s. And then after that came another school of TA called the Integrative Relational School. That was formed really by Erskine, Rebecca Troutman, and I put 1988 to present day because a lot of the writings, the early writings of the Integrative Relational School, started really by Erskine in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Their association was started off in 1998, the International Integrative Association. And their focus is not on working purely with the parent ego state and replacement parenting, or in fact strengthening the adult ego state up with Burns' focus, or working purely with the child ego state, though they did work a lot with the child. Their focus was really on what we call the integration of the self. Their integrated psychotherapy had two major strands that they draw on in integration of theories of self-psychology, TA, Gestalt, etc. A lot of drawings from early psychodynamic thinking, with the idea of the client, the therapist working with the client so the client can understand and be aware of the fragmented, cut-off parts of the self, parts they've disowned, parts they've let go, and the therapist helping the client take ownership of an integration of the self. Their methods were inquiry, attunement, and involvement. And also a therapist working from this school would be looking at the unmet relational needs, and Erskine has 8 of those, which I've talked about in an early presentation. So the methods were inquiry, attunement, involvement, looking at unmet relational needs, but most importantly, look at how we can help the client take back the parts of themselves which they've split off in terms of the trauma, etc., and helping them integrate those different parts of the self. Okay, after that came the final school, chronologically that is, which is the relational school of transactional analysis, which is very different from the relational integrative school of Erskine. But this relational school, which came to prominence really from about 2002, the founders were Bill Cornell, Charlotte Sills. I put Stills there, but it should be right Sills, that's S-I-L-L-S, and Helena Hagenen. There were other TA therapists that actually became part of this group and started to write seminal books and articles on the ideas of the relational approach. So the focus here isn't so much the integrated self, taking back parts of the self, isn't so much working with the parent ego state or working with the child ego state, or as Burns said, strengthening the adult ego state, but far more looking at the co-created relationship in the present moment between the therapist and the client. As I put here, a concentration on the co-created relationship as the vehicle for change. So the therapeutic relationship was their major focus, a sharing of the relatedness in the co-created relationship between therapist and client as a vehicle for change. And they wrote a very seminal book in 2008, Helena Hargaden and Charles Sills, which is called Relational Transactional Analysis. So that's a very vogue and very modern approach. They formed their own organization called the International Association for Relational Transactional Analysis, which many of these people have surrounded themselves around, and many of the new TA therapists have joined this particular school as well. Okie dokie. And finally, if we look at the overview, then Burns School was the concentration of the adult ego state. The cathexis School was the concentration of the parent ego state. Redecision School was working within the child ego state. The integrative relational school was very much looking at integrating the adult, taking back parts of the fragmented self and taking ownership of the new self. And finally, the relational school, which is looking at the co-creation of the therapist-client relationship. Okay, so that's the 5 different schools briefly. One important thing, though, is to remember that whether the TA therapists concentrated on the Burns School, the cathexis School, the redecision School, the integrative relational school, or indeed the relational school 2002 onwards, they would all think theoretically, of course, ego states, transaction analysis, proper, games, and script as the sort of hub, the theoretical framework, the Burnian theoretical framework that underpins the whole concept of transactional analysis, which was formed by Eric Berne in the late 50s, early 60s, and became the fundamental block for all these different schools in terms of how they've developed. So though the methods might be different, or in fact some of the orientation may be different, the theoretical concepts are still very much the ones I've just said: games, transaction analysis, proper, ego states, and script. Okie dokie, thanks for listening, and I hope this has been useful for you. Bye bye.